What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another podcast episode here on Mets Central. This is Mets podcast episode number 97, where today we're going to get into a lot of discussions and a lot of talking points. Obviously, we all know it's the offseason. The Mets were eliminated from, the season and, playoff contention a while ago. It's been now 3-4 weeks, about a month. Obviously, a lot of postseason baseball has been played already. I don't know if you guys were watching last night, but Game 3 of the World Series yesterday between the Blue Jays and the Dodgers went 18 innings. That was a crazy game. The whole Freddie Freeman walk-off home run. But obviously, it sucks that the Mets were not in the playoffs. It sucks that they couldn't make another deep run like they did last year, where they made it to the NLCS. But we have a lot of big talking points for this podcast episode. Obviously, and if you guys look at the title, we obviously got Tyreek Skubal rumors. We got Pete Alonso rumors about his free agency and about how the Mets are going to attack that. And then we also got some coaching changes, some news yesterday with Desi Druskull. He's left the organization. Obviously, Antoine Richardson, that's another big thing, and a lot of people were upset. We'll obviously deep dive and talk about that. And the Mets also did hire a new hitting coach yesterday in Troy Snitker, who is going to serve under Jeff Albert as the new hitting coach, and they'll work with each other in a tandem. But guys, before we get into this podcast episode, and obviously, like I said, we have a lot of stuff to deep dive into. I just want to give everyone a quick little update about the channel and where the channel is currently standing. So I don't know if any of you guys saw Evan's stream that he did. I believe it was 2 nights ago on Ranger Central. Evan, for right now, would have a mental health break from both social media and both the YouTube standpoint. So I don't know exactly how long he's not going to be doing this stuff. I don't know how long exactly he's going to do this hiatus per se. But listen, all the respect to Evan. I love him. He's one of my best friends. I've known him for 2 years now, and we've developed a great bond and a great partnership by doing these podcasts and doing these live streams. And we love creating content for you guys. This is one of the main reasons why we do it, because we want to entertain you guys. But at the end of the day, you have to take care of yourself. You have to take care of your mental health. So all love and respect to Evan, and I hope personally that he's back here, soon, sooner rather than later, and we can, continue doing these stuff and feeding you guys content, throughout, the coming weeks, the coming months, and the coming years, hopefully. So, but yeah, obviously, like I said, massive love to Evan. I got a lot of respect for him, and hopefully he takes care of himself, and he's gonna get back to doing this again. But guys, like I said, we have a lot of stuff to do. Oh, and also before I continue on to that, I'm going to be continuing the channel though. So I will be, hosting these live streams for the time being. We are going, or at least I'm going to try to do these podcasts every Tuesday. I know during the off season it is a bit slower, especially with MLB free agency. Those deals and those free agency deals, they tend to be drawn out a little bit longer. So like I said, there's going to be weeks, and there's going to be, there might be even stretches of weeks where, there's not a lot of news coming out. So like I said, I'm going to try to feed you guys live streams throughout, the whole off season. If, there's not really anything too busy going on, I might be maybe dropping, little videos about trade ideas, maybe potential, lineup opportunities and stuff like that. Because of course, like I said, during the off season, sometimes there's just no news, and it's like, it's kind of hard to go live and to try to do a whole 45-minute to hour podcast episode when there's nothing really going on during the off season. And listen, like I said, I know that maybe you guys aren't too excited to see me as the full-time host. It is what it is at the end of the day. If you don't like me, then oh well, you can find another podcast to do it. But if you do like me, hey, you get more of me. So it is what it is at the end of the day. But I am very excited to keep feeding you guys content, throughout these coming weeks and these coming days and these coming months. However, though, for this podcast episode, if you guys didn't notice in the title, I do have a very special guest for today's podcast episode. This guy, and listen, this guy, I haven't known him for a long time. I've known him for a couple months only. And we actually met via, Evan actually knows this guy a little bit more because of the whole, he watched him a lot on YouTube during, the Call of Duty days, the Call of Duty Zombies, Call of Duty Black Ops, which I'm sure, we have plenty of people in the chat right now who are big Call of Duty fans. So I'm sure maybe if you're a fan of that series, you probably know this guy. But like I said, known this guy only for a couple months, met him at the Mets Phillies game. and it was the one that Brandon Nimmo ended up walking off Johan Duran. And the Mets ended up taking game 2 of that series. They ended up sweeping them. We thought that maybe some momentum would be building, but we all know how that turned out with the Mets ultimately missing the playoffs. But like I said, this guy, he's arguably, and again, this is my opinion, arguably one of the most funniest people that I've seen on the YouTube space in terms of comedy. He wants to be a future comic in the coming days. He's hosted many podcasts, most notably Professional Child on YouTube. He's Brooklyn born and raised. He shares the same legal first name as me. He notably loves to call everybody a sexy bastard. So please, everyone, welcome to the stream, Turbo.
Oh my
What is
God.
going on, my man?
Oh my God. You make me feel like I honestly achieved something in my life. Oh my God. Thank you so much, Matt. I appreciate it. Oh my God.
No problem.
That was a great day. When we met at the Phillies game. And I'm not gonna lie to you, it really did make me feel like I finally had people to talk to about my crazy Met rants and whatnot. But Matt, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to get all of my rants out with you because I think we can have some good conversations. And yeah, no, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I mean, like I said, and for people that don't know you personally, because obviously you are kind of
Yeah, no,
not
100%.
majorly known in the comedic space.
Again,
Obviously,
that's what I'm trying to say. I'm nobody, Matt. Listen to me. I'm just. I told you before. I'm a blonde albino from Brooklyn. Okay, that's who I am. I took a. I did again. I was Call of Duty Zombies YouTuber. That's how Evan got to see me. I first of all was taken back when I joined the stream one day, and I was taken back by Matt's Evans just like, oh my God, it's Turbo in the chat. And I'm like, who the fuck? What the? Because I just didn't. I never expected like a Mets like channel to ever like follow me because I still have like Call of Duty fans still follow me, and I was like, all right, let me watch the stream, and I joined it, and it was really really cool. So I definitely was given a lot of self-confidence back, and I told you guys you really make me feel special and very nice, so thank you very much. I'm happy to be here again, and I just saw that gives me Joe Beningo style rant. I love Joe Beningo. Listen, bro, I don't care what's going on here, all right? It ain't gonna be well. The Mets just lost their first base coach. It's not good.
yeah, obviously we'll get into the whole Mets coaching carousel, but like I said, Turbo, you just gave the people, you gave our subscribers a mini introduction about you. But obviously you are a Mets fan because you're wearing a Mets jersey. I believe that's what, a Mike Piazza jersey you're wearing, or a Mike Piazza jersey number 31.
I'm not even going to lie to you. I thought this was the new Oakland Athletic. No, this is a Mike Piazza jersey, and it's one of. And I'm not. I don't have nothing against the people of whatever it was, it Mitchell and Ness. This is a large. It acts like a children's medium. I don't know what's happening, but this is a Mike Piazza jersey. Yes, I love it. I love the black jerseys. I mean, come on. I know people hate them. I know people don't love them. I love the black jersey. I love it. I think it's
I mean,
nice,
you
bold.
can't go wrong with the black jersey, in my opinion. But
No.
but yeah, like I said, before we get into the news, why don't you just give the people, a brief introduction of, why you're a Mets fan, how you became a Mets fan, and kind of that, and then after that we can kind of go into our main talking points for today.
Okay, yeah, no, because I can go on for a rant. So let me try to keep this a long story short. I became a Mets fan. So my father's a Yankees fan. My whole family, like uncles, whatever, Yankees fan. I I wasn't into baseball growing up. I was about like with football outside. I know what baseball was. I knew the rules, whatever. But I never had a team. I never interested in playing. It was mostly GameCube at the time, and I was interested in baseball around the time I was 8, 9 years old. And I used to play hooky from school because I didn't like school. And sometimes I would go to my grandma's job. She used to work at a hospital, and one of the doctors in her offices was a huge Mets fan. And he convinced the hospital to paint his office and change it all up to be a Mets office. And that just, again, I guess I'm very gullible and convincible, but I just walked into that room like, oh my God, the orange and blue. I saw he had like a Shea Stadium chair when they took it all down. He had a chair from Shea Stadium. I sat in it. So I guess the whole magic of the Mets took me in when I played hooky with my grandma. So I then started to play MLB 2K on Xbox, only the Mets, Carlos Delgado, Carlos Beltran, Carlos Gomez, all those guys in the Mets at the time. And I became a Mets fan. My father cursed himself out. What did I do to deserve this? My son's a Mets fan. And I became a Mets fan about like 8, 9 years old. That's when I started playing baseball. And ever since then, yeah, it's been downhill from there. I shall say. But yeah, that's the quick rundown. I went against my family. Basically, I'm the Anakin Skywalker of baseball in my family.
You turned to the dark side.
Yes.
All right, but yeah, I mean, and listen, obviously, we tried to get you on the podcast earlier during the year. Obviously, with the couple months, raining down, we tried to get you on late August, early September. Yeah. We unfortunately couldn't because our schedules just didn't, work out. But I mean, quickly, I mean, I know the people and our fans, they've heard me and Evan talk about, the just disastrous end to the regular season. What was your perspective on the whole Mets collapse and them missing the playoffs and then now going into the offseason? What kind of frame of mind are you in right now?
You didn't tell me we were gonna get into this. You didn't tell me I was gonna have to prepare for Xanax and some downers. You didn't tell me this was a part of the deal. I saw this as a slow. This was a slow death. This was a slow death. I think for, I honestly think the last time I had hope was watching David Peterson in the All-Star break, on the All-Star game. That was the last, like, oh my God, where the Mets type of feel I had. And I would, just watching that last couple of months, especially August, September, beginning of August, I said, this is not good. Like, even if we make the playoffs, are we joking here? Are we looking at what the team is? Like, offensively, yeah, we were still competing, but we were putting plumbers and electricians on the mound sometimes, and it was just not great. So I just saw this as a slow burn. That, like, around that time when I saw you guys the Phillies game again, that's when they gave us a little bit of hope. I was still holding on because, again, I'm a fan. I'm not going to just give up, but I was holding on, and I just saw this as a pitching failure. A pitching failure. You cannot blame, again, whatever. We got Yankee fans with the whole Soto thing. Go scratch your ass. It is a pitching failure.
Yeah, listen, I think for me, and listen, the pitching obviously deserves a lot of blame, right? Because they collapsed a lot during, the second half of the season. And I mean, we'll get into more of that as, we talk about, a later bit on this podcast about, future pitchers that the Mets could add. Obviously, there is a rumor that the Mets might be in the market to add a big time ace. Obviously, you guys will be able to tell by the name that I put in the in the title of the stream. But yeah, I mean, listen, obviously the pitching was to blame. And, because those starting pitchers like Senga, like Minaya, because those guys weren't able to go deep, that meant the bullpen had to work a lot more. And then we saw, guys in the bullpen start to fall off. And then also, we can't forget that the offense throughout the majority of the year, yes, they had little stretches here and there where they produced, where they put up a lot of runs because
inconsistent.
Like we've talked. Sorry, go on.
Inconsistent.
Yes, 100% inconsistent. Me and Evan, we constantly talked about through this year, and not only this year, because this has been a 4 or 5 year thing, especially under Eric Chavez and his whole time here being a Mets hitting coach. We always called it the bipolar offense because there were stretches where this offense was clicking and everyone was going from 1 through 9, and then there will be points throughout the year where it just seemed like no one was hitting. And again, that led into the starting pitchers getting more tired. That led them to get more fatigued, and then that impacted the bullpen. And then also, we have the poor coaching decisions because, of course, the Mets this year, it seemed at least through the eye test that for me, they were, and Evans even say this a lot, that it seemed like they were one of the worst defensive teams in the league this year. And they took a massive step back to where they were in 2024. And then, a whole colossal, base running decision errors. And then the fact that, again, like Carlos Mendoza, he didn't have a great year overall. And, I at least wanted him fired. Obviously, David Stern decided to keep him, and he's going to be back for year 3. But that's a whole another discussion point. But I mean, yeah, for me, and then obviously, you can obviously blame David Stearns too, because, he was the one that assembled this roster. But guys, we're obviously going to get now into, to the main discussion points about, the stream in this podcast episode. And like we were just talking about with the whole starting pitchers, and again, not giving them length, and the fact that they collapsed out the second half of the season. This is where I wanted to start with this podcast episode, because it's clear the Mets need to go out there and address the starting pitching this year. Obviously, they still have guys under control. David Peterson's still here. I believe he has one more year left of control. You have Clay Holmes here, who signed for 2 more years at $12.5 million. You have Sean Manaea, who's here for the next 2 years as well. He's making $25 million for the next year. Frankie Montas is technically here, but the guy's getting Tommy John surgery. And listen, Turbo, I'm sure you could get into a whole Frankie Montas rant if you really wanted to. But thank God that we're never going to see this guy put on a Mets uniform ever again. Obviously, there is, the whole discussions about Kodai Senga, what to do with him, but
he should be put back on a plane. He should learn how to start giving like TED Talks about baseball and not be on the I apologize. Continue.
No, listen.
No, I apologize.
You are free to talk, and you are free to jump in whenever you want to. But I think the clear thing, and the one thing that severely hampered this Mets team, and I know last year in 2024 you could say, oh, but the formula of the depth pitchers and stacking a lot of them, it worked, but to me that was never really fully sustainable. And when you look at a lot of the teams this year that made the playoffs, they have ace pitchers. They have those number one guys. When you look at them, you say, when this specific guy takes the mound every 5 days, I know he's going to give me length, and I know he's going to give me results. And whether you look at teams like the Boston Red Sox this year with Garrett Crochet, which is someone that the Mets, I wish, traded for him during last offseason. And that was a guy who, because when the whole Garrett Crochet rumors came out last year and the White Sox were shopping him, I was very excited that the Mets could potentially, go out and acquire him. Obviously, they were in deep discussions with the White Sox. They just couldn't, get a deal together. And obviously the Red Sox had a bit more of the better prospects to get to be able to pull that deal off. So they were able to, obviously, there were rumors also that, the Mets, they could have offered guys like Jet Williams, Brandon Sproat, and a little bit more. Obviously, I'm not sure what else the White Sox wanted, but to me, and again, this is going to jump into where what we're going to discuss more. But to me, if the headliners for that Crochet deal was both Jet Williams and Brandon Sproat, I mean, I would have easily pulled the trigger on that deal, because again, when you watch a guy like Garrett Crochet, it's like what I said before. It's a guy that when he takes the mound every 5 days, he's going to go out there, he's going to throw strikes, he's going to strike guys out, he's going to give you length, and he's going to give you results.
I just hate, and I apologize, I just hate giving up. Every time I see Pete Armstrong, I get PTSD with giving up offense with this team. I mean, I feel like if we're giving Jet Williams or whatever, I mean, I definitely think we got to do what we have to do to get the players. But at the same time, I think we need to be cautious of trading offensive players with this team right now, in my opinion. Because I feel like we still, I mean, pitching we can acquire and we can develop, and I think we have that with Tong, we have that with McLean. I think we have some backed up. Offense, I mean, I feel like that's a little more hard, not harder to get by. Pitching, obviously, it's more hard to get gem pitching, but I'm not sure. That's how I just feel personally. I was happy we didn't touch a lot of offensive minor leaguers this year, to trade and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, to me, it's all about context, right? And to me, it's about what type of player and who are you acquiring? Because if I'm acquiring a guaranteed all-star and a guaranteed Cy Young Award winner pitcher, listen, I am open to trading a lot of guys for this set pitcher. And obviously we'll get into it because we have a couple
pitches could be fragile though. They're very fragile.
Listen, 100% they could, But to me, this Mets team, especially coming off this disastrous year, because it's not like obviously if you
Now they have
recall,
to try
at,
anything. I agree with you. They have to
yeah,
start pulling tricks and stuff. I get it.
because remember, if you recall after the 2023 season, where again that was a year with massive expectations, they ended up missing the playoffs. Obviously, David Stearns comes in, and the whole 2024 going into that was supposed to be more of a transition year. And obviously,
Right.
they started off very poorly. They ended up, with the whole magic of Jose Iglesias, JD Martinez, stuff like that. They ended up, making the playoffs, and they made a deep run to the NLCS.
Yeah.
And then again, high expectation this year, complete failure. But to me, and we've talked about this with Evan a bunch of times. To me, where this is different is going into next year. And to me, I always said that regardless of how last year ended, going to next year, it was always going to be high expectation because going into spring training or this upcoming season, the goal is to win a World Series. We're not doing transition year anymore.
I'm so sorry, but ever since David Stearns came onto this organization, became the owner, in my opinion, every year needs to be a competing year.
You mean Steve Cohen?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, Steve Cohen. David Stearns is not there yet, but Gary Cohen. Not Gary Cohen. Yeah, oh my God. I said Gary Cohen. Oh my God. Did I say Gary Cohen in the beginning?
No, you said David Stearns was the owner, but I said Steve Cohen was the owner. So,
well, in my head, why not Gary Cohen? But no, yes, fucking Steve Cohen. Oh my God. Jesus Christ Almighty.
Oh, it's all right. It's all right. These mistakes happen, but to me, like I said, the fact that the Mets are going into a year where it's a must-win year, like you have to at least make a deep run. Because, like I said, for me, next year you at least have to get to the NLCS. If not, you might even have to get to the World Series. And I know that's challenging because the Dodgers are in the National League, and the National League is a notoriously tough league. Obviously, you still have teams like the Phillies, you have teams like the Cubs and the Brewers and stuff. But I'm sorry, like at the end of the day, the Mets have one of the richest payrolls and one of the richest owners in all of baseball. They have a pretty deep farm system. They have very good players. Let's not forget, let's not forget that we just signed Juan Soto last offseason to a $51 million a year contract. Still have Francisco Lindor. So this team still has major talent. And let's not forget that, some of these guys are getting older. Yes, I know Juan Soto is 26 years old, but Francisco Lindor, he's getting up there. So, we have to go for it now. And this is why, for me, looking specifically at the trade market, because I know when you look at the free agency market this year, it's, in terms of starting pitchers, it's not really too strong. The biggest name probably for me on the free agent market is Framber Valdez. And to me, I like Framber Valdez. I think he's a very good pitcher. Obviously, he's won a World Series with the Houston Astros, and he's been a very big part of their rotation. But to me, I am just not really feeling throwing a big-time contract at Framber Valdez, who, like I said, at times has shown he's a good pitcher, but I just don't think he's not the guy where you throw that one big contract to at a starting pitcher. Because like you said, Turbo, starting pitching, and especially pitching today in general, it's very fragile.
Yeah.
But I think what we've seen in terms of how you handle giving out contracts to pitchers, you have to be smart, and you have to be smart about who you give out those contracts to. Because there's a couple guys where, listen, if they hit the market, I'm absolutely giving them a big time contract. Look at the Yankees with Garrett Cole. Sure, they haven't won a World Series yet, but Garrett Cole up until this year was healthy, and he was a guy that, like I said, every 5 days he'd go out there for the Yankees, give you length and give you results, and always gave you a chance to win. And that's the one thing that the Mets really lacked this year. Obviously, like I said, they tried to stack this. They tried to stack this rotation and make it deeper with guys like Minaya, Senga, Peterson, Holmes. Ultimately, it just didn't work. And like I said, to be a full-time contender and to be a team that could really win a World Series, you need that big-time ace. I don't know, like, what's your opinions on that?
No, 100%. Again, with the whole thing is whenever it comes to whenever we have a big signing, right? I'm always the number one person to say one player cannot change a team. I'm always that person. When it was Max Scherzer, even Juan Soto, when we just, if we'd acquired Edwin Diaz for the first, just getting big players and then being, oh, this is it. Oh, here we go. At the same time, it always comes down to October. So I'm always like, and it's very naive of me, I guess, to say this because it is sports talk. It is what we're doing and what people do. Um, I'm always the one to be like, all right, yeah, we got the player. I mean, I can't say anything until October, or I can't say anything until the playoffs because look how many players that are big signings that we get or are big for any other team, and then they flop in October. It only takes one game to fail, and then they're done. Like Max Scherzer in the wild card game. So I'm all for big signings and doing what we have to do, or getting the players to make that leap. But what I feel is making I'm a huge of growing and taking time with developing our own talent and maybe going through the strides in that than always throwing money. However, that's why I think it should be more with the money than the trading players. Steve Cohen, I think, could do anything, in terms of money and in terms of making things happen. So I say we make the right deals and the right transactions for the pitchers. But try not to always go for that number one guy, because look how many teams do it without it.
True. But I mean, and like this is something that we brought up before, like in terms of the innings pitched, and just to
Yeah.
show you guys because I have it written down right here. This is the amount of innings that the Mets got from each of the starting pitchers from this year. David Peterson, 168 and 2/3 innings, which on paper looks good, but when you add in the context that he massively fell off in the second half, it's like
Yeah.
okay, sure, but not great. And then like I said, your top two are Peterson with 168 and 2/3, and then Clay Holmes with 165 and 2/3 innings. Which, listen, for Clay Holmes, I think he had a very good year. At least in my opinion. I know some people will, because and I don't know if it's a ex-Yankee thing, or maybe it's because people don't exactly like Stearns' philosophy of sometimes
Mhm.
turning relievers into pitchers. But for me, I thought Clay Holmes had a decent year. Sure, did he have his moments where he didn't look exactly great and fatigue kind of caught up to him at different points of the season? Absolutely. But we have to remember, this is a guy who hadn't started at the major league level for 7 years. Last time he was a starting pitcher before this year was with the Pittsburgh Pirates in 2018. He ended up being traded to the Yankees, being converted into a reliever, being a closer for them, and in his first year of being a starting pitcher for the Mets, 165 2/3 innings, which was 100 innings more than he pitched in the previous year out of the bullpen for the
Yeah.
Yankees. And let's not forget the biggest thing, because like you mentioned, Turbo, with pitching being fragile, Clay Holmes went out there. He made every single start. He made 31 starts,
He
which is
did
very
better.
valuable.
He did better than expected. I would definitely say a lot better than expected. That's all you could really ask for him, honestly. That's all you could ask.
100%. 100%. And listen, with Holmes, finished the year with which I believe was a 3.51 ERA. And like I said, if you told me that Clay Holmes going to this year, when we signed him, was going to make every single start and give you a 3.51 ERA, and also let's not forget game 161, the guy single-handedly put the Mets on his back and kept them alive to potentially make the playoffs. So
Yeah.
with Clay Holmes, I think he's fine going forward as a back of the rotation depth option, especially like I said, when he's only being paid $12.5 million a year. That's
Mhm.
cheap for that kind of production. Obviously, like I said, it's not a
Yeah.
guarantee that he's going to go out next year and stay healthy and repeat that same type of season. But at least for me, because obviously, listen, it's valuable to acquire and you need front end starters, but it's also very hard to acquire reliable back end starters. And I think with Clay
100%.
Holmes, if he could repeat the same season, or at least give you a season that's similar to this next year, and maybe you hope it's a little bit better, because again, it will be year two of him being a starter. The fatigue's going to be a little bit more figured out. Maybe he learns to incorporate more of his arsenal. I anticipate that Holmes is going to be a very valuable weapon for the Mets next year. But then the biggest one, which raises red flags, Kodai Senga,
I was
113 and
just
a third.
I was just gonna say, I mean, we're talking a lot about pitching, but the one I feel like we needed to bring up, and I'm happy you did, was Kodai Senga. He's the one that I feel like really sunk the ship of the rotation this year, in my opinion.
Listen, 100%. And for me, listen, I've always liked Senga.
Me
And
too.
to me, I never, because this is the whole like misconstruction I feel that some Met fans have, because I think people saw Kodai Senga perform in 2023 and they saw him perform at least the first half of the 2025, and they're like, oh, this guy's the ace. To me,
Yeah.
I never felt that Senga was the ace in the first place because let's not forget when he was first signed in 2023 coming over from Japan, he was supposed to be the number 3 starter behind Scherzer and Verlander. It was only because that Verlander and Scherzer struggled so much, and they ended up trading them at the trade deadline that year, that Senga had to be elevated to that quote unquote ace role, which he really never was, in my opinion. Which I don't know if you want to touch upon that.
You know what? I honestly thought he had a great chance of being that. I really did. I thought he had a great chance of being the like the ace of the team. In my opinion, I do think I know he had a great first half, the injury, whatever. That's when he went downhill. But if that's the case, do we give him another shot? I mean, I think we're giving him another shot next year. Is he on how much more years does he have?
He has 3 more years left at, I believe, $12.5 million or 50. I'm sorry, $15 million. 15.
Do you think a team is going to want to eat that, or Steve is going to? I don't know, because
I mean,
I don't want to give him a lot. How many? It was like what, 8 starts in a row? Like the last 8 starts he had that was just losses. I mean, we can't have that.
I mean, even David Stearns at his end of the year press conference, because I believe there was a question asked towards him about Sanger and the pitching staff and how they kind of broke down towards the second half of the year, and even David Stearns said, "Listen, it would be silly for me and for us to pencil in Kodai Senga for at least 30 starts next year."
Yeah.
So, and listen, and let's not forget that Kodai Senga wasn't a David Stearns. He wasn't a David Stearns signing. Billy Epler signed him in 2023. So, Stearns doesn't really have any sort of, like I said, not love affair, but he doesn't have any responsibility, let's say, towards Kodai Senga per se.
Yeah.
He doesn't have any loyalty. That was the word I was looking for. He doesn't have any loyalty towards Kodai Senga. So I believe if the Mets could trade Senga this year, and if there are suitors available, now so with the money thing and the years thing, because 3 years at $75 million, that's still a lot of money. So will the Mets have to retain some money in that case to maybe trade him? Maybe they do. But if there was a team out there that will be willing to trade for Senga and take on all of his money with all the extra luggage that goes on with him, because that's also the thing with Senga. It's not only the fact that he gets hurt a lot, it's the fact that he has this thing where his body needs to feel perfect every single time he steps on the mound.
He would always say this mechanics thing was off. My mechanics were off. My body wasn't in tune. It was never like, oh yeah, he's had a bad game.
And that's the biggest thing for me, because listen, sometimes as a pitcher, you're not always going to feel 100%. Now listen, I'm not telling you to go out there on the mound and throw 90 pitches, with your arm falling off. But I mean, if you have a little, like a little niggle here and there, like sometimes, you have to pull through it and get through it. At the end of the day, you're a professional athlete. But
then if he does bad, and then we hear
but then again, that just goes back to the whole point where the Mets are probably gonna have to look to offload him. And I do believe, and even me and Evan, we touched upon this. I believe it was one podcast or 2 podcast episodes, but we said, if Senga is able to be moved this offseason, you have to look at moving him. You do. And again, that's money that you can free up, and that's valuable money that you can free up, because let's not forget, the Mets potentially do have a lot of money coming off the books next year. Obviously, Pete Alonso, he's opting out of his contract, and we'll talk about more about that as we dive deeper into this podcast episode. Obviously, we have the whole Edwin Diaz situation. Is he going to opt out? Will he opt back in? And if he does, are the Mets going to offer him a contract? You have Jeff McNeil, who the Mets could trade. Brandon Nimmo, maybe could he potentially be traded? I know that's a little bit more difficult because he has a full no trade clause, and 5 more years he's making $20 million. So I don't know about that, but there is opportunities for the Mets to free up money. And like I said, with Senga, if there is an opportunity to trade him, because like I said, the guy, I like him, but he's as durable as a condom. You can't rely on him. You can't rely on him. So, but like
I'm scared to be your condom, Matt. There's condom companies all over right now. Like, I know what? Jeez Louise. But no, I get what you mean, and I don't know. I'll let you go into what you want to get into, but yeah, no, I definitely think that when it comes to Brandon Nimmo, I don't think so. I don't think Brandon Nimmo should get traded, or whatever.
I think
Don't
there's a
touch
discussion
Nimmo.
to be. Listen, I like Brandon Nimmo. Obviously, he's a longtime Met. He's been drafted here, he's been developed here. I
Yeah.
I just also feel like that there kind of has been inconsistencies the last couple of years, and let's not forget that Nimmo notoriously he does have stretches where he's not healthy, and we kind of even saw this year. It wasn't for too long.
I
It
was
wasn't
gonna
like what
say,
we
yeah,
saw.
he doesn't have it for that long though. He's never been a guy that's been out for like a 2 weeks or something like that.
I mean, earlier in his Mets career, he was more injury prone, but you still
Mhm.
see him, occasionally with. I don't. I'm not saying he's like Kodai Senga bad in terms of
Yeah, yeah,
injury level,
yeah.
but he does pick up little injuries from here to time. But even then, you kind of saw his defense take a little bit of a step back in the second half of the year, and that's something also a big thing that we're going to get into, especially with the Pete Alonso thing, because David Stearns, another thing that he addressed in his press conference after the year was run prevention is a massive thing that the Mets want to improve upon this upcoming year, because there was a lot of points where the defense cost them a lot of runs, and it cost them a lot of valuable games and a lot of valuable wins, which could have led to them making the playoffs. So, listen, to be like I said, I don't believe Nimmo will be traded because I believe just his contract is too difficult to maneuver a trade around. But I also do believe that you kind of have to break up. And I'm not saying fully strip down this core because obviously you can't. Juan Soto's locked in. He's,
Yeah.
he's here for 14 more years. You have Lindor, who's going to be here for another seven years. But the two guys that you could move on from is either Pete Alonso or Brandon Nimmo. And to me, like I said, we'll get into more Pete, but I think you kind of have to break up this core just a little bit because, again, this is another year where high expectations and this group ultimately fell short. And at
Mhm.
the end of the day, when you fall short with high expectations, sometimes there needs to be consequences.
You're right, 100%.
Yeah, and like what Evan said, Nimmo just doesn't know what a pillow is and how to cook chicken.
I mean, you know what it is though. I just now that's something. Yeah, I think McNeil is a bigger
Yeah,
contestant.
McNeil has to go.
I think he's a bigger contestant, and would that be a lot of money? I'm assuming being let go.
He's so on his contract. He has a guaranteed one more year left after this upcoming year at $15 million, and then he has a club option after that. So his contract, in my opinion, is movable. And like I said, he just came off a year where he was actually at least solid
Mhm.
offensively. So I do believe that's a contract that you can move on from. And I think the Mets
Yeah,
and David Stearns are going to try to at least move on from him. Oh, we got it. We got
yeah.
actually special guest here. I wait for him to turn on his camera, but
No
guys, we
way.
we do have another special guest. But yeah, I mean Evan. I mean not Evan. Turbo. Just continue on what you were saying before.
No, I was just gonna say basically about McNeil. I see a lot of teams having McNeil on the going for McNeil because I would see them looking for a player that is a little older than Nimmo. I definitely see McNeil having a better spot in other teams than Nimmo because I think Nimmo is, like you said, the core. I don't think we need to start breaking up more of the core. If we want to be a World Series team, look at the Phillies that people always argue that they want to break up the core. And now that the mustache is in the call, I don't know how to take this seriously now. I really don't. I mean, I'm not, my heart just shuddered. It just shuddered. And the sweat is starting to develop. Evan, you sexy bitch, how are you?
What's going on, guys? How we doing here? I'm
Oh my
Oh, we're
interested.
God.
good.
I was interested enough in the conversation where I thought I'd make an appearance here, just talking about McNeil, of course. And by the way, I appreciate everyone in the chat showing love earlier. Matt heard the intro. Appreciate it. Love you. Love both of you. And yeah, I mean, did you have more to add with the McNeil thing,
No,
or
no, no. Oh my God, Evan, you are here. Please take over. I need to know exactly though, if you would like to get rid of Nimmo. Would you think Nimmo being off this team would be good?
I go back and forth on it, honestly, because it really comes down to if you have a replacement or not, guaranteed. Because the problem, honestly, is for me, I don't hate the idea of keeping Nimmo. It's just if you're getting rid of the core, he's the guy I would want to get rid of because if you're bringing Alonso back, or if you don't bring Alonso back, rather, you have way too many left-handed bats because on the free agent market, your replacement for Nimmo would probably be Cody Bellinger, or I just assume they're going to target Bellinger either way, another left-handed bat. If Kyle Schwarber's replacing Pete Alonso, another left-handed bat. So you keep Brandon Nimmo around, you got way too many left-handed bats, and this team desperately needs it. They still have Beatty, Carson Bench if he's going to come up next year, another left-handed bat. So that's really where I have the problem, and it comes down to what you could get for him. I think that, we talked about it earlier on in a couple of different episodes that maybe, a trade to Seattle where you get like Luis Castillo could be intriguing. I don't know how much term Castillo has, but you get a starting pitcher in the mix at least. And, the money's a little bit more even. But the problem is, will Brandon Nimmo wait for Seattle? I don't know. I at least would have the conversation about waiving his no trade clause because, like Matt talked about before, and like I've talked about all offseason, this team needs to get better defensively. And if you could upgrade Brandon Nimmo with Cody Bellinger, which bat wise, I think they're on par, maybe Nimmo slightly better. But I mean, defensive wise, all day I'm picking Cody Bellinger over Brandon Nimmo.
You mentioned a player that I forget about all the time, but I'm like, they really should get this year. I mean, I could see, and I'm not so invested no more in Brett Beatty. I'm not so invested no more in Ronnie Mauricio. So I think maybe involving those two players and more, I would love to have maybe Kyle Schwarber for his last couple of years on the Mets. That would be a good one. But I think he's going to be stubborn. I think he's going to be a personal little bitch when it comes to going to the Mets. I really do. I really do. But I would love it. I would love it.
Yeah, I mean, it really just comes down to because Matt, I think you sent it in our text group chat earlier that we're in that the projected contracts for guys like Alonso and Schwarber down the stretch, and to me, I'm giving Schwarber that contract over the Alonso one. I think it was 5 years for what was the money again? Like 130 something, and then the Alonso one was 6 years, 160, which you're talking about a 30 million difference for one more year.
How many more years do you think Schwarber has, though? How many more years do you think Kyle Schwarber has?
I think you're going to get 3 to 4 good years. I think you'll get 3 to 4 good years, but I think that the last year might be rough of it, which, that's where you're going to have the conversation of, is this contract worth it? Because you have guys like Marte, who they just overpaid, and the last 2 years were garbage.
Uh-huh. I don't know, because when it comes to like Pete, I feel like you have a lot more years that to really stretch out something than Kyle Schwarber, because Kyle Schwarber, I think I was gonna say 2 to 3 years maybe.
If he's looking for that, then I'm giving him that deal easily, because I'm still I was just frustrated when they didn't sign him when he first hit the market, because to me that was just a no-brainer, right in your face kind of move, and instead they went a different direction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, listen, we're going to get into the whole Pete Alonso discussion and potentially Kyle Schwarber as an alternative a little bit later, but I just want to finally, get to this main starting pitching point, because like we talked about earlier, you need that big time ace. Now, obviously, there are a couple guys that could be available this year. I mentioned before that Framber Valdez is the only really main big time starting pitcher on the free agent market. Even though I like Framber, I'm just not very open to, and I don't like the fact that I just don't like the fact that you're gonna have to commit that amount of money and that amount of years to Framber Valdez. Because I don't think he's that type of pitcher that is worth that type of money. But there are other ways that the Mets could go about acquiring a quote unquote big time ace. And I do have a couple names here on the list on the notes that I wrote down. And the one specifically we'll obviously get into more, because that is the big time, or at least one of the big time discussion points. Obviously, you have guys like Freddie Peralta, who David Stearns is very fond of, because he was with him in all those years in Milwaukee. He's obviously he's obviously a pitcher that could fit that quote unquote ace type of role. You have Hunter Green from the Cincinnati Reds, who the Reds did lock up to a couple years ago to an extension. So I'm not sure if the Reds are completely open to trading him. We know that the Reds are typically more of a cheap type of organization with their ownership. So maybe potentially if you given the right type of trade package, maybe you could entice them into trading Hunter Green. I'm just not completely convinced that Hunter Green is going to be available via trade. But if the Mets don't land their number one target, I think if Hunter Green is available, that's the guy that I'm 100% jumping all over on to acquire him. Obviously, like Evan mentioned, you have Luis Castillo, who you could acquire from the Seattle Mariners, and there is a bunch of other type of pitchers that the Mariners also have that maybe they could be open to trading to in terms of maybe replacing one of the bats that they're going to lose this offseason, because guys like Josh Naylor, I think Randy's a free agent this year, and Eugenio Suarez is going to be a free agent this year too. So maybe they look to trade flip one of those guys for a big time bat. The other two guys, obviously one is more realistic. I wish the other one was realistic, and I think eventually he will get traded. I just don't think it's going to happen yet this offseason. Obviously, that guy being Paul Skeens, I think it's only a matter of time before the Pirates end up trading Paul Skeens. We know that their ownership group doesn't like to spend money, and we know that when Paul Skeens inevitably hits the free agent market, he's going to get a bag. And like I said, I think because Skeens has so many years of control left, I think the Pirates are at least tempted to hold on for him, at least for maybe 1 year, maybe 2 more years. But eventually, when he hits the trade market, that's a guy that's the Pirates are going to get a haul for him back. I mean, they're going to get a ton of prospect capital for him. But the guy that, and there's been a ton of rumors about him being available on the trade market since the Tigers were eliminated by the Mariners in Game 5 of the ALDS. That guy being Tarik Skubal. And I have a couple graphics here for you guys that I cooked up last night. But this is Tarik Skubal, his last 4 years as a major league pitcher. Obviously, he started in 2020 and in 2021, but his last 4 years, and the numbers just jump over themselves. 2022, pitched 21 games, 7.8 record, 3.52 ERA, 117 and 2/3 innings pitch, a FIP of 2.96, and a WHIP of 1.156. Obviously, towards the end of that year, he ended up having to get flexor tendon surgery, so it caused them to miss the end of the end of the 2022 season, and it caused them to miss the start of the 2023 season, which is why you only see here he only pitched 15 games. But again, in that season, even though he only pitched 15 games, 7-3 record, 2.80, 80 and a third innings pitched, a FIP of 2, and a FIP under 900. But then you look at these last 2 years, and this is why the Mets just, if Tarik, it's like I mentioned before with the Crochet one. The Crochet was a huge miss, not being able to trade, or at least not pulling off that trade for him. These last 2 years, like I said, if Tarik Skubal is really available on the trade market and the Tigers are actually interested in moving him, you have to I'm open to basically moving whatever, and we'll get into more of that because I do have some mock trades lined up. But these last 2 years, 2024, Cy Young Award winner, All-Star appearance. And like I mentioned before, you need those quote-unquote big-time aces that go out there every single 5 days and pitch and give you results. 31 games, 18-4 record, 2.39 ERA, 192 innings pitched, a FIP of 2.49, a WHIP of 0.92, and then this year, this past offseason, or at least this past season. Again, All-Star in 2025. Looks like he's going to go back-to-back in terms of winning the Cy Young. Again, 31 games pitched, which is something that you like to see. 13-6 record, 2.21 ERA, 195 and a third innings pitched, FIP of 2.5 or 2.45, and a WHIP of 0.81. Obviously, I'm going to let you guys jump in and have your opinions on Tarik Skubal. But like I said before, if Tarik Skubal is available, you have to do almost whatever you can to get this guy. Because like I said, this year, even though the Mets are coming off a disappointing year, the expectation is win a World Series. And to me, if a guy like Skubal's on the trade market, you gotta get him. You got to get him because that's the guy, and especially if you can pair him up with Noel McLean and you have that 1-2 type of dominant duo like we're seeing right now with the Dodgers in the postseason where they have guys like Blake Snell and Yamamoto, constantly flip-flopping. If you can establish that type of depth at the top of your rotation, that puts you on the directory of being a World Series contender.
If you want, I'll go first to get my whole crazy rant out of the way. I will say that with the Devin Williams going to the Yankees and failing there, having Montas coming to the Mets and failing here. Montas was on the Brewers, correct? Am I going crazy here? Am I going crazy?
Yeah, he was on the Brewers.
That is a bad omen. So Freddie Peralta with, coming here, I think it's an omen. I think that'd be bad. But I also think, let's see, Skubal with the Mets. I think that is, in my head, the best case scenario for like getting our ace pitcher. Paul Skeens, again, what you mentioned before, I think that's a lot of, like a lot of prospects involved, like a big chunk of an org is going to have to go to get Paul Skeens. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know if that would be great for the Mets, but I do like Skubal. I do think overall, with all this talk about, getting the ace and, for the Mets, I think that is one of the last puzzle pieces we were always missing, is getting that ace. We've had Luis Severino. We've had these, Jose Quintanas. We've had, the experiments with Clay Holmes. We always had like plugins, I think we do need to capitalize on any ace pitcher. And I think Skubal would be a great one. I just don't know if Paul Skeens or any other of, I think like a rising ace as we see in Skubal right now is something we need instead of like an ace where I think a lot of orgs have gone through or like have given chances. I think we need one now where we're giving the pitcher their main chance at a World Series. But the Detroit Tigers had a great chance last year, so who knows what he might want to do. Does he make a crazy decision and stay in Detroit? That could be crazy and wild.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I said it a couple times that you have to land one of Skubal, Peralta, Ryan, and I forgot the fourth guy. I guess Hunter Green. You could throw in that category. You got to land one of them this offseason. And to me, I just don't get this idea where people are thinking they're gonna have to give up some crazy haul for Skubal. I mean, one of the trade comparisons is in the chat that I was gonna reference, the Corbin Burns one. That's one of them where that basically was a nothing trade. And then I'll even give you another one. Juan Soto, when he went to the Yankees, we're talking about a Boris client, and you're talking about a top 5 player in baseball that got traded. And you know what the return was? It was a converted reliever into a starting pitcher in Michael King, which at the time no one thought was going to
Yeah.
work out as well as it did for the Padres, which good on them that they turned King into the starter they did. But now he's probably going to walk. Drew Thorpe, who was ranked 8th in the Yankees organization, that's probably your Brandon Sproat comparison there. Johnny Brito, who was ranked 14th in the organization. Randy Vasquez, who was ranked 27th in the prospect pipeline, and a backup catcher in Kyle Higashioka. This narrative that, the Mets can't get him without giving up Noah McLean or Carson Bench is absolutely moronic. There is even an argument they do not have to give up Jet Williams to get him. I would do it if it took it. Like, to me, the only 2 guys I don't want to move from the system are McLean and Benj. I wouldn't hate giving up Benj as much because to me McLean's untradeable this offseason. But everyone else, fair game. I prefer not to give up Benj if it's what it takes, then it is what it is. But I could really see a world where it costs Sproat and probably Jet Williams as the 2 headliners and maybe like David Peterson. And that's a mock trade I saw earlier as well. And to me, I'm pulling the trigger on it. You have to ask the question of what other teams are going to be in the mix, because the Dodgers will probably be in the mix because it's the Dodgers. The Phillies, maybe if they're willing to give up Andrew Painter, that could make things a little bit interesting, and as well as a couple of other teams. But to me, I'm just, like if you could make the trade without giving up Bench or McLean,
Yeah,
I'm doing
we
it.
do that.
And if you can't do it, then there are so many aces available to pivot to on the trade market that you could pivot elsewhere. And that's where the conversation comes in of, do you do this trade or do you go the extra mile to get Hunter Green, who, while he's not the better pitcher, you're guaranteed extra years. Where with Skubal, the thing that, Met fans are worried about is he going to walk? To me, I'm not that worried about it because if the Mets are going to give up prospects, I think Cohen will, provide Stearns the funds to go out and sign him and keep him here long term. But even then, for next year, I want an effort where they're actually going to go in. You only have so many years of Juan Soto in his prime. You only have so many years of Lindor in his prime. If you bring back Pete, you only have so many years of him in his prime. You need this ace to try to win. And again, if it's a 1 year thing, that sucks. That's only 1 year, but I'm willing to roll the dice with potentially winning a World Series.
Yeah, 100%. I think the key thing with me in terms of, if you're going to do trade comparables, and I kind of do have a couple mock trades, like I said earlier, that I was able to put together last night. But I think the biggest thing for me, because people will always ask, what will it take for the Mets to trade for Tarek Skubal? What are the Tigers be interested in? And I think the Tigers are in a weird spot because they're a team that, if they probably could extend Tarek Skubal if they really wanted to. It's just their current owner, who was the son of Mike Ilitch, he's kind of more in the mold of a Hal Steinbrenner, where he's kind of more responsible with the funds in terms of just, throwing whatever money it takes to keep whatever player or get whatever player. So I think if the Tigers did want to try to extend Skubal, and listen, I don't think he's going to sign an extension regardless of if he stays in Detroit or if he gets traded. He's hitting the free agency. He's hitting the free agent market no matter what, because at the end of the day, he's a Scott Boras client, and he's going to get paid. And the Tigers president of baseball operations, Scott Harris, he was at the end of their season, he held a press conference similar to what David Stearns did, and he was asked about the whole Tarek Skubal thing, and he didn't really answer it. He kind of just danced around it and just gave up like a positive PR answer about not committing to either trading him or not trading him. And to me, I know people will say, "Oh, see, clearly they're not interested in trading him because the president of baseball operations didn't say that he might be traded." To me, I just think that's more of a president of baseball operation protecting his asset, because if you say something that's kind of taken out of line, that could either negatively impact your trade value, or that could positively, or increase your trade value even more. So I think Scott Harris was just trying to be a little more conservative and being a little more safe with his answers in terms of trading Tarek Skubal. And again, like the Tigers, for me, they're going to try to win next year because they made, it was back-to-back years of them making the ALDS. I know they kind of had like a mini collapse this year, and they were still able to squeak into the playoffs, but they still have a lot of great players on the roster. You have Kerry Carpenter, you have Riley Green, you have Spencer Torkelson, Skubal right now, you have Casey Mize also as another starting pitcher. So the Tigers are a very good team. So it's kind of weird to me. I think the Tigers are in a thing where they don't necessarily have to trade Tarek Skubal, unless they're kind of just keeping this under wraps. They know they're not going to extend them, or at least they're not interested in giving him all that money. And then we'll see, maybe, because like I said, at the end of the day, I think this is just all trying to keep leverage and not trying to lose leverage for the Tigers' sakes in terms of trade talks. But like I said, I do have a couple of trade mocks that I do. So I have two trades here, and, obviously I'll read through them and see what you guys think of it. And obviously I'll pull up any chats that anybody in the comments say. But trade one, I think this is more of the trade that I'd be more willing to do. But obviously, I have the Mets acquiring Tarek Skubal, and going to the Tigers, I have David Peterson, Brett Beatty, Jonah Tong, and Jet Williams. And then in trade two, I have the Tigers acquiring Carson Bench, Brett Beatty, Jonah Tong, and Brandon Sproat. What are your guys' thoughts on these two mock trades that I put together?
I say don't touch Jonah Tong. I say don't touch Jonah Tong. Throw McNeil in there. I don't know. I don't touch a young prospect that looked, in my opinion, good, like really good. Why are we throwing away other people that we can potentially make other teams better for? I mean, Terry, we're getting one player here. I don't think Jonah Tong.
Listen, I get it. And listen, I think Jonah Tong is going to be a great pitcher in the future. Don't get me wrong. I hate that I have to throw him into this, because ideally in a perfect world, I would love to keep him. Like I said, at the end of the day, the Mets' expectations next year are going to try and win a World Series. Like I said, this is nothing against Jonah Tong. I love Jonah Tong. But you could clearly see from last year that he wasn't ready yet for the major leagues, and he still needs more seasoning. And to me, if you can swap him for Tarek Skubal, who, like I said, and I brought it up, a guy that is going to make every single start, and he's going to dominate, I would much rather have the proven veteran pitcher who's on course to win back-to-back Cy Youngs than a kid in Jonah Tong, again, who I like, and nothing against Jonah Tong, but it's potential at the end of the day. And again, when the Mets are in this position right now where they have to win, I'd rather have that proven, Cy Young winning pitcher in my pitching rotation. And that's one of the major reasons why, for me, Nolan McLean is nowhere near these trade talks. And like what Evan brought, because Nolan McLean, unlike Jonah Tong, McLean's going to be on this roster from day one. He's going to be on the opening day roster. He's going to contribute to this team from the get-go. So for me, it's like I said, I want to have that double duo at the top of my rotation of Tarek Skubal and Nolan McLean. So that's why for me, and like I said, you have to give to get. And for me, I would rather give up Tong than Benj, because I think Benj, especially when you look at this offense, because obviously we don't know necessarily how they're going to attack this offseason yet in terms of the offensive side. But for me, I'd rather keep Benj and have him blossom, because I think he can come up quicker, at least to start next year, and then be a productive player, especially with the fact that the Mets don't have the Eric Chavez problem anymore. We can kind of try and get these positional player hitting guys a little up more quicker, because we don't have to worry about Chavez ruining these guys. So for me, like I said, ideally in a perfect world, I don't want to trade Jonah Tong. But would I rather trade Tong for a guy that's proven and a guy that's going to take the ball every 5 days and produce, and it's a guy that's coming off back-to-back Cy Young Award winners? Absolutely. I 100% throw Jonah Tong in there.
I don't think you can make that confidence answer by being like, all right, we can keep certain offensive or give away certain offensive because of, or we used to because we don't have Eric Chavez no more. I don't think that saves us from any offensive problems, you know what I'm saying, going forward. But I do think we need to see Jonah Tong and Brandon Sproat. I do think we need to see him a little bit more, and they can maybe be in the middle off season, on the table for the middle of the off season, if we're not seeing any great, star potential, rotation concrete material. So I don't know. I mean, is there, and I'm actually asking, is there like no way that teams would if Cohen threw in like a couple million of dollars without throwing in Tong or something like that? Like, is that not a thing that that'd be entice
No,
them?
I don't think that'd be. I'm pretty sure you could do that in trades. I just don't think the Tigers would be interested. I think they want that young.
So then why not? So then why not McNeil? Why not another potential another prospect? But not, I don't think. Yeah, I understand. I see in the chat you have to throw a prospect pitcher to get an ace. I get that. But I just think maybe not Jonah Tong. Sproat, yeah. I think we can get. I believe Sproat could be someone we could see on the trading block. But I guess the only thing I would see here is just I have an issue with Tong. I want to see a little bit more of Tong.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I'm fine with trade 1. Trade 2, I'm not a fan of, because I don't want to give up both Benj and Tong in the same deal. I think, though, that I think either way, both are kind of overvaluing a bit what the return's going to be. I truly think that he's going to go for less. I think that trade 1, you swap out Tong for Sproat, and I think that would get the deal done. I could be completely wrong, but
okay, I can see it a little bit better. I can see that better.
I could see it getting it done, and if it takes Tong, I would still do it, because you're getting 1A, 1B of the best pitcher in baseball. And, you have to keep in mind, too, like, if Skubal does walk and the Mets do everything in their power to extend him, you still have a couple of other pitchers that are going to hit the market next year, because the Mets could easily pivot to Freddie Peralta if, Skubal ends up walking. Let's say it's the Dodgers, because, of course, it's them giving him the money. Then you could pivot your money elsewhere, like the Yankees did when Soto left, giving it to Max Fried and, getting Cody Bellinger. You could pivot that elsewhere. So to me, I'm willing to take the gamble. And the other problem is, as well, you don't want to have too much of a logjam with these prospects, because, I have Rangers hangover here with this, where they freaking built up the farm system and they never trade the prospects for the star player. And then all of a sudden, these guys had no room to come in and develop. The same thing could happen here if they, overstock the system, where, where's Jet Williams going to play right now, realistically, if he comes up on the roster There's really no room for him right now. And, Carson Bench is kind of taking over at center field. If they move McNeil, okay, but I still think they're going to trust Brett Beatty more to get the reps at second base. So right now, there's no room for Jet. So to me, like, you got to maximize these guys while their value's high, because I also don't want to see a scenario where, the Mets could have potentially traded for a superstar a couple of years ago, but they didn't want to move Brett Beatty thinking he would be a star player, move Mark Vientos thinking he would be a star player. To me, I just hate prospect hugging. That's really the thing. It's just bit me in the ass so many times where I'm like, no, don't trade these guys. And then they come here and they're not as good.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think for me, I agree that trade two, that's a trade that I want to stay away from, because I don't want to do both Benj and Jonathan. But to me, I think trade one, I'd be perfectly fine if it went through. And again, listen, ideally, if you could swap Brandon Sproul out and replace him with Tong, 100%, do that all day. I'd rather keep Jonathan. I just think the Tigers will look at this as, okay, I'm giving away Tarek Skubal. Give me the proven, at least semi-reliable pitcher in David Peterson. I know he had the terrible end to last season, but he's at least shown flashes that he can at least be a semi-reliable mid-rotation arm. So I think they'd want that. I think for Brett Beatty, I think that's a guy that they see as okay, that's a lower to middle towards the order type of bat who plays at least a solid glove at third base. And obviously, they have they have Gleyber Torres at second base. They have Javi Baez, of course, who could play shortstop. So, Beatty could slide into third there and be a cornerstone there for their offense. And then Tong, I just think, they will want that quote unquote young type of ace pitcher. And then again, like Jet Williams, I think that's just another thing. And again, like what Evan said, like there's a logjam right now in terms of, middle infield prospects and then even outfield prospects with Carson Benj, because I think Benj, and listen, I'm not saying Jet Williams won't be a great player or a good player when he gets to the major league level. For me, I have more hope that Carson Benj will be that more type of impact player that the Mets will need. So I think that the Tigers will look to, at least they'll be enticed and want to acquire a guy like Jet Williams, who could play in multiple positions. Because of course he could play the middle infield, he could play the outfield. But I agree with you guys. Trade two, I'd stay away from, because I don't want to give away Carson Benj.
Mm-hmm.
But trade one, if you could 100% do that, I'm pulling the trigger on it 100%.
And you brought up a name that I didn't even, mention for the Tigers' sake that makes this more interesting with Gleyber Torres, because he's probably going to walk. The Tigers aren't going to pay him. So if they're able to acquire Williams and Beatty, two guys that could play the infield, and cut corners there by not paying Gleyber Torres, I think that's going to be interesting for them. I think they would want something like that.
Do we all still love Mark Vientos?
No.
I don't know. The problem is that when he hits, he's great, but when he's not hitting, he is useless. And
he just
can't take that gamble to me.
Listen, he is a good-looking guy. But I'm getting frustrated a little. I mean, I'm gonna give him the sophomore blues this year. That's what I'm giving him. That's what I'm marking it as. I'm marking it as sophomore blues. Mustache didn't really work out for him. I'm giving it like that. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I give him some tips, Evan. But I think that it didn't work out. But yeah, no. I mean, I could see, but I don't know. When it comes to like me and my glass ball, like, looking into the future, my crystal ball, I would probably see like it being like Tong, McLean, Vientos, and maybe a sprinkle of Francisco Alvarez if he can get like good and like, maybe like, like competent, like by playing all year. But I think that in my head, but I don't know about Vientos. It's a little weird.
I just don't think he's going to be here next year, honestly. I think that given what Stearns talked about so much with run prevention and the fact that Vientos kind of got put to the wayside by the end of the year, to me, it just seems like the writing's on the wall that he's gone. And I think they'll get something good in return, better than what fans think, just because there's going to be teams that value what he did in the playoffs last year, which is kind of what Hornet's saying there. And on top of that, just what he did that entire 2024 season, even
That's
glimpses
why
of
I'm
this
trying to
season.
mark it as like a sophomore blues thing. That's why I'm just marking it up as that,
Yeah, like that's the thing though, because it's just like it's where I struggle because I like the idea of with a new hitting coach seeing what he could be, but it's also like, are you in a position to take that gamble? Like if they're pulling the trigger on this type of trade for Skubal, you don't really have time to wait around and see, okay, is Mark Vientos going to be our DH? You got to go for it next year. Like if you're getting Skubal, you are all in on next season.
100%. I think the biggest thing with Vientos for me, and we've stated this before, Evan, the guy just has no position, and I think David Stearns, he looks at that and says, nope, I can't do it, because again, there's so many times last year where his poor glove costed them runs and eventually costed them games, and again, like we were saying, like if Mark Vientos, if he doesn't hit, he's useless, because again, the guy, in my opinion, he's the skinniest player I've ever seen be that slow. Like the guy is absolutely.
Oh my God! Don't get me started with the speed. Him and Lindor with the speed.
But yeah, like I said, he can't run, the base. He's got no speed, and again, if he's not hitting, what does he provide for this team? Because again, like I said, his glove is next.
He is a good-looking man. He has the skin like almond butter. It is beautiful. I mean, again, that's what he brings. That's what he brings.
and listen, like I said, I know that there is the potential with maybe a new hitting coach with Jeff Albert and Troy Snicker coming in, that maybe the Mets could potentially re-unlock Vientos and get what you got out of him from the 2024 season. To me, though, like I said, I just think it's too much of a risk when you can get more of a proven, established player. Because like I said, if there's a chance where, let's say in a hypothetical world, right, the Mets could sign Kyle Schwarber to DH. Who would you rather have as your DH? Kyle Schwarber, who's a proven home run hitter over his last 4 years, or over his major league career with the Cubs and the Phillies and the Nationals and the Red Sox, or would you rather have Mark Vientos, who showed flashes in his 1 year of playing up here full time, but really hasn't really established himself? Or let's say, like hypothetically, the Mets were to sign Cody Bellinger to play first base and still had the money to sign Pete Alonso to DH. Again, would you rather have Mark Vientos, who has shown flashes, or would you rather have the proven home run hitter in Pete Alonso? I mean, I know the route that I would go down to, because like I said, at the end of the day, this upcoming year is a high expectation year. They have to go far and try to win a World Series. So for me, listen, like I said, if they try to keep Vientos and see what they get out of him, like I'll give it a chance. I would not be a fan of it to start the year.
I mean, even you could get like Josh Naylor or Ryan O'Hearn at a cheaper pricing. Like, I'm sorry, but I'm taking those proven guys over Vientos right now. The only problem is what I've laid out before, where you're kind of creating a logjam with a lot of left-handed bats if you get one of those guys, and that's the part that's going to be interesting. Like, I feel like they're going to have to acquire a bat. If Alonso goes, they have to acquire a bat via trade, because you can't go into a season where all of your top bats are left-handed bats.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's obviously the next thing we're going to move on to in this podcast episode. Pete Alonso. Does Pete stay?
Do I stay or do I go?
And basically, just quick rundown, and then after this we'll get into it. But here's the quick rundown of what we know so far. Pete Alonso, who signed a 2-year contract last year, a 2-year $57 million deal last year in February. He obviously opted out of his contract for this upcoming offseason. According to reports via Mike Puma of the New York Post, he's seeking a 7-year deal. A 7-year deal would take Pete to his age 37 year. Boris, because naturally he has to do this, he used both Marcus Semion's 7-year, $175 million deal and Matt Chapman's 6-year, $151 million extension as comparable for Pete Alonso. Alonso sees himself as a first baseman, while the Mets would ideally want him to DH. Stearns was very adamant in terms of improving run prevention in this offseason. And obviously, like Evan brought up before with the Jim Bowden projection, I have it pulled up here, but he projected his contract to be at 6 years, $182 million. And the two big questions and the things that we're going to tackle here: how long will Stearns and the Mets be willing to wait for a Pete decision? And second of all, what does Pete's final contract look like when he finally does sign, whether that be for the Mets or for any other team? Your guys' thoughts.
If you want, Evan, you can go first. I went first last time.
What I'll say on this is, it's fun to play pretend, right? It's fun to be delusional and, think that you're going to get this kind of contract because we saw this movie last year. And I know that Alonso had a better year this year than he did last year, but I just don't see a world where a team's giving him 7 years. I really don't. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But like I just don't see it, especially because, you have the comparables of Marcus Semien and Matt Chapman up. You're telling me that, those are comparables. Like Boris is trying to slap that as comparables when you have Marcus Semien, which that contract has aged poorly as of lately beyond winning the World Series, and Matt Chapman, who's a Gold Glove third baseman. You're telling me a first baseman, probably DH in 3 to 4 years, is comparable to those guys. And Marcus Semien was able to play shortstop as well at the time he signed that contract. A first baseman's all of a sudden comparable to that. I just don't see at all how that is the case. I really just don't. And I think that the Mets, they can't wait as long as they did last offseason
100%.
on a decision because, like I kept saying before, if you're waiting on that decision, what is your big right-handed bat? Last year, at least you were able to, sell the fan base after Vientos last year, the way that or in 2024, rather, the season he had, you could sell the fan base. Well, Mark Vientos had a good year. He could be our big right-handed bat, and we have other prospects coming up. Where is that landing spot this year? What are you selling us on? Francisco Alvarez and what he did in August and September? Because that's great. And, I like the idea of Francisco Alvarez with a new hitting coach being able to get back on track to be a power hitter. But again, if you're making trades for the Skubals of the world and then all of a sudden you're selling the fan base, Francisco Alvarez is the cleanup hitter and the big right-handed bat of the offense, then that's kind of contradictory to one another.
I'm not great with like predicting the numbers like years to money. I'm not. I just know this for I just want this to be known. I want Pete needs to be a Met for life. I think when you have a player like this that has come up with the organization, that has given the organization more moments than almost any player in the recent years, greatness, happiness, a reason to go to the ballpark, a reason to buy a Mets jersey before, or Lindor, whatever happened. I think we need to understand, and I think Pete needs to understand. And I don't think Pete's the type of guy to go all for the money. I really don't. I'm not sure. I don't know him and his family. God bless him. But I don't think he would be that type of player to, we'll see him in the White Sox because he got paid or whatever, or we'll see him playing Oakland, whatever the hell Oakland plays now, freaking Sacramento in Idaho. I don't think he'll be that player to get the money for a random team. He just needs to be a Met for life. I think Steve Cohen knows that. I think Pete Alonso knows that, but not as much. I just think players don't understand how impactful they really are. If Pete Alonso does not come back as a Met, a lot of kids are going to be who came into the Mets for Pete Alonso because of Pete Alonso. It's a hard loss, and I know it's business, and I know stuff happens, and they're not going to care about little Timmy who's living in Queens. But it is a big organizational move. It's not like, oh, yeah, we lost McNeil. Oh, yeah, Nemo's gone. We like Nemo. He was a baby face. I feel like this is a statue-worthy player that we would lose, in my opinion.
No, listen, Turbo, I 100% agree about that. Pete Alonso is like one of those guys, and because he's been here for so long and he's grown up. He's been drafted by the Mets in 2016. He came up with the minor league system. He came up in 2019, broke the rookie home run record by surpassing Judge. Mm-hmm. I agree that he's a big piece of this team and a big piece of this team's history. And listen, I love Pete Alonso. I have his jersey. It's in my closet right now. I've seen him hit a ton of home runs live at Citi Field. And I would love to keep Pete Alonso. I would. Because
and when I say Met for life, I'm not saying like, oh yeah, give him the 7 years. Give him the. I'm saying when I say Met for life, I also know his age. I also know he's not, with first baseman, and he'd be a D. I think he'll be a DH towards the end of his career. It's gonna be hard. So when I say Met for life, okay, maybe. And I'm sorry to cut you off, but I think it'll really be a good 3 years, a good 3 years, maybe a good 4 years. Give it another high school try. Give it another 4 years, or give it another 3 years. I just think that would be, in my term, giving him another opportunity. Because after 3-4 years, in my opinion, then I think Met fans would be like, all right, we gave you the money. We gave you a couple of years to kind of try something. If he doesn't have a year like this, maybe it'll be a little easier. If he had a worse year, like before that big home run with Milwaukee, and like when we all were hating on Alonso, maybe it's a little easier for us to have this conversation right now. But because of the hype and the love and the home run achievement and whatever, I think that's maybe making me a little more biased. But I still think, whatever the case may be, we need to give him a contract, and it needs to be a respectable one too.
No, and listen, I think the Mets will offer Pete a contract, and like I said before, I would like to have Pete back, but I have my limits. If he's really looking for the 7-year deal from him and Scott Boras, which I don't know if that's just negotiating tactics or anything, I'm sorry, Pete. I have to let you go. And for me, my limit, I would ideally like to offer him 4 years. I would be willing to stretch it to 5 because the two contracts I'm kind of going between with is 4 years for $110 million, which is $27.5 million a year, and then 5 years, 125, which is $25 million a year. I think if you could get either one of those two deals, I'd be willing to go for it. Anything more than 5 years, though, I'm sorry, Pete, you have to go. And listen, the only team, though, I'd actually believe would be willing to give him a 7-year deal, because we know typically aging first basemen don't really do too well in the first base market. The only team that's going to give him 7 years, hypothetically, is the LA Angels, because Artie Moreno's a terrible owner, and that organization just doesn't know how to build baseball teams, because for some reason they love to overpay older first basemen. For whatever reason, I'm not sure. But like I said, and also with the fact that I do expect a couple more teams to be involved this year in his free agency market, just because unlike last year, Pete doesn't have the qualifying offer attached to him. So I think teams would be willing more to offer him a deal. But at the end of the day, it's all about the market and what the market is telling you. Because I know that there were, and Turbo, I don't know your personal opinions on this, because a lot of people last year were personally upset with the way that David Stearns and Steve Cohen handled the Pete Alonso negotiations. Now, me and Evan have stated this. We thought both Stearns and Cohen handled the negotiations well with Pete, because Pete was in a market where he was asking for an absurd amount of years, an absurd amount of money, and he had no power. He had no leverage. The Mets had all the power. And again, when you're negotiating, why would you bid against yourself for a player that doesn't have any leverage? So the Mets
also, no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'll just finish. But the Mets waited it out. Obviously, like I said, Pete tried to get a better deal, but ultimately he had to settle. He came back to the Mets, and they agreed to that 2-year, $57 million deal with an opt-out after the first year. No, listen, I don't think Pete is going to eventually sign a short-term deal like he did this past offseason. I think he will get more of a longer-term deal, which is, like I said, 4 or 5 years. I think he'll get that. But like I said, if he's asking for 6 or 7, I'm sorry, the Mets simply have to walk away. And then this goes back to the first point where, and like what Evan brought up, the Mets and Stearns cannot afford to wait as long as they did last year. Because let's not forget, they came to that agreement in, I believe, early February, a couple weeks before spring training started. You cannot afford to wait. You cannot afford to wait this long when you have other guys available on the free agent market who could play first base / DH, like Cody Bellinger, like Kyle Schwarber in terms of DH, like Josh Naylor also, even Alex Bregman if you want to throw him to that. So because other guys will sign, so you can't wait this long and do this back and forth haggle game with Pete and Boras. You ultimately have to make a decision.
What I was going to mention real fast is if he also, and I remember this was a conversation after the whole thing with Pete Alonso finally committing to the contract he did with the Mets for the 2-year thing. When that was happening and the whole, he was still a free agent, there was no qualifying if he liked an offer another team gave him, he would have taken it. Am I wrong? Like
no. In terms of the qualifying offer, I mean that if
no, I'm not saying
that.
I'm not saying what you're saying is wrong. Whatever. I'm saying in terms of Pete, like if Pete he signed the offer he did last offseason because of what reason? He probably didn't get another offer from another team he liked. Am I right?
Market.
So, and he needs to be smarter now, being like, you look at the great position you have in front of you. We learned last offseason you didn't get what you thought you were worth from other teams. You learned that. Who knows if that's going to change now? You have a homegrown organization that the fan base fucking would enter you into their homes. And you're gonna get paid. I'm suspecting a respectable contract from Steve Cohen. So it's not like he's gonna get spit in the face. He's not like gonna be like slapped away. He's gonna get an offer in front of him that I think Steve Cohen would be able to afford and say he deserves. But I think it's going to be another case where he's going to realize maybe not other teams are going to want to give him the 7 years as well. Like you mentioned, he's going to learn the hard way, I think, which may make the time go long, in my opinion.
Yeah, I just don't buy this 7 years crap. Like, the only teams that we've heard linked to Alonso as of now are the Yankees and the Phillies. Like, is this just not a clear Boris tactic here, linking him to their biggest rival and their crosstown rival?
I was gonna say if you see Pete Alonso, I can maybe live with him on the Phillies, maybe live. But if I see him in a Yankees jersey, do you understand? Do you understand what I would do? No, I with that fucking sandbox of a stadium they have. Do you understand what I would do? I would go insane. I would go berserk. Look at Evan. Evan's staring at me like I'm calling the cops. I'm calling the cops.
I don't know. I don't buy this whole thing that those teams are going to give him 7 years, but the Mets might not. Like, this is just Boris 101 here. Like, I'm just done falling for the shit. Like, if it comes from someone that's not his mouthpiece and John Heyman, okay, I'll listen to the conversation. But everything magically has come from John Heyman, and magically he's the one connecting them to the Yankees and the Phillies. So it's just clearly Boris tactics here, and pick me up when someone else is reporting something on Alonso, because then I'll actually listen.
We're gonna have to wait for another press conference where Boris goes like, "It's warming up in the North Pole" or something like that. We're gonna have to wait for one of those.
Oh yeah, he's corny bullshit. Yeah.
But yeah, and before we move on, like in your guys' opinion, or in your guys' opinion, what do you believe when Pete signs, whether it's with the Mets or with another team? What do you believe his final contract looks like?
I see 5 years. I see 5 years. I'm obviously not sure what the price would be, but I do see 5 years. Well, 5 years, at least $20 million a year.
It's gonna be more than that. It's gonna be more than 20.
Yeah, I'm thinking 5 years, 30 per, maybe slightly over 30.
But then you ask that question, like, obviously, the Mets could pay that. But then, the great question. I mean, the Phillies are looking like the team where, like, situation-wise, they're breaking down. They're starting to, like, see what's going on. They may throw him like a bag, being like, "You're our new future to a puzzle." Like that. I see the Phillies maybe doing that. I do.
Yeah, I could see it. And then, because I think last offseason, apparently they considered it for a bit, and then Harper would have went back to the outfield or something. So, I mean, it could happen, or he could just DH now that Schwarber's probably
a lot of Philly players. I mean, Castellanos obviously, but now Harper had a little
get traded.
Yeah, I mean, Harper had a little tit for tat like in the media recently, being like, "Oh, well, why are they talking about trading me?" Whatever. But I'm not sure what that's all about. But what Philly, other than Schwarber, would you maybe want to see on the Mets if like shit
Ranger
goes down?
Suarez, if he walks and signs for a reasonable contract for the middle of the rotation, I'd be happy with him. And then you trade for Skubal, and then you have McLean and Ranger Suarez as your top three. I feel good about that rotation, but again, it really comes down to what would Ranger sign for.
Yeah.
because I'm not giving him more than 3 years.
I'm sorry to start another tangent, but now we're talking about Pete and the Phillies. I'm starting to think like they do seem like a good fit, because if they're gonna break down, the squad we have is old and we can't do it no more, we can't have another shot. They may add Pete. That's scary. That'd be scary.
That and Dave Dombrowski's job might be on the line going in the next year, so it's like we gotta do whatever to try and solve this shit show, especially if Schwarber leaves. That's when I get worried. Like, that's the thing where if you do want Pete Alonso back, you better hope Schwarber stays in Philly, because if not, then I think they're one of the bigger threats.
Teams should have that in their contract. Like if I was Steve Cohen, I would be in everyone's contract. Like I'm telling you right now, like in the first 5 years after this team, you're not going to any of our competitors. You're not going to the NL. You're not going to the Yankees. That's not happening. Like that should be in every player's contract. I think that like Pete shouldn't be allowed to sign to the Braves or the Phillies. Like that should not. That should be illegal, I think, in the United States of America.
Yeah, this is also another name that that Raymond brought up. And I mean, we were just talking about the Phillies, but I mean, think about it. Like if Kyle Schwarber ends up walking, he ends up signing somewhere else. They're going to trade Nick Castellanos. Again, that opens up another outfield spot. They could possibly be pursuing Kyle Tucker, like what the Yankees are going to do. The Dodgers are going to fucking pursue Kyle Tucker because they need more fucking superstars on their team. You could potentially even go back to the Cubs as well. So, there's a lot of interesting names, and I'm very interested to see how this offseason plays out in terms of in terms of the all-star guys hitting the market.
Just to go back to the Alonso thing for a minute, because I saw someone say 4 years, 120 in the chat. What if you just go more money and you steal from the Dodgers playbook before the CBA is up and defer the money? That's what I would like. To me, that would make the most sense if the Mets went that route where, okay, we'll keep you around, but we're deferring your money.
Well, yeah, that could be cool too. Like they defer it till after whatever, if arbitration happens, you don't get paid, that money gets deferred. I'm not sure,
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I think that's up to the players. If Pete wants to do that, I don't know, maybe he wants to get paid all up front.
That's where it comes down to, does he really want to stay?
Yeah, because I know Minaya took deferred money last year when he re-signed with the Mets. So, is it possible? Sure, but ultimately it's up to Pete and what he wants to do with Scott.
It's that money, baby. It's that money. They want that money.
So
he won 2 home run derbies. He got $2 million. He's good. He's fine.
I mean, yeah, that's really the thing, though. It's like, to me, I would go the extra mile to pay him if he's willing. Like, how bad do you want to be here? If you want to be here badly, then take the deferrals. That's what I tell him.
Okay, I'm so sorry, and I know you want to move on. If you had one phone call, like one voicemail, both of you, one voicemail to Pete Alonso, what would you say to him to convince him, like to show him? What would you say?
Matt, you go first.
Pete, I like you. You're a very important part of this team.
I like you. I like you.
All right, fine. I love you, Pete. But can you do me a solid? I'll give you some extra money behind under the table. I'll slide you some money later down in life. Do you want to come back for a little bit cheaper right now? But in the future, I could give you some nice rewards.
Yes, like Cole's cash.
Maybe buy some fucking art on the side as well. I don't know what you like, Pete.
Yes. All right, Evan, you're up.
Peter Morgan Alonso. I love you.
Oh, you went the legal name. Uh-oh.
I love you, but you're ridiculous with your 7-year ask. How bad do you want this? How bad do you want to be in Queens? How bad do you want to be the face of the Mets franchise? How badly do you potentially want a statue? And if you want that statue, we'd love to keep you around, but you got to sign for less term. We'll give you your money. We'll defer it. If you're willing to take the deferrals, we'd love to keep you around, but we can't go 7 years for you.
And then quickly, I would just give him the phone. I'd be like, listen, Pete. I'd FaceTime him. Obviously, I like to see the face. I'd FaceTime him and go like, Pete, you look at this. You see? I'd cut my wrist. They go, that's orange and blue. I bleed orange and blue. I bleed orange and blue. You see this? I got to call a doctor. It's orange and blue. You need to stay here. You need to do what you were born to do. You need to look in the mirror. You need to say, I am the Mets. I am who I am. That's what I would say. And then there'd be a cops, FBI, SWAT, TMZ coming after me. Then that follows.
I'd also throw in the jersey retirement and the Mets Hall of Fame thing. So
We'll give you a box. We'll give you a box like Soto's family. Soto's family's box.
Got plenty of boxes, but guys, we're also we're gonna look. We're not gonna wrap up just yet. We have one more topic point and one more discussion point. Obviously, there was news over the last couple of days of a couple changes to the Mets coaching staff. I know some people are not a big fan of one of the coaching departures, but there were a couple, and obviously this goes in hand with. And obviously, Turbo, I do want to get your opinion on Eric Chavez going, Jeremy Barnes, Jeremy Hefner, Carlos Mendoza staying. So before we get into the most recent news, what is your opinion on those guys?
This is actually very interesting because it's funny. This is one of the things in our group chat you mistakenly added me into. Because I'm torturing you live in that group chat. I already told Matt, Evan, I apologize for all the times where Helsley would throw a meatball or something would happen, and I would then put 15 paragraphs into the group chat while you guys are probably taking a shit. I would say I think I would fight with you guys by being like, I'm not someone that blames the coaches all the time. I think a little bit towards the end of the year. I think I don't want to say both of you, but I think the blame game was a little too hot. But after revealing a lot about, I'm speaking mainly about like Carlos Mendoza, because Carlos Mendoza, the general manager as a team, he really is a puppet. He really is. There's really no more like oomph anymore behind that role. Yes, you're making decisions, you're pointing fingers, but when it comes to like blaming Eric Chavez, I didn't even think about blaming fucking the pitching coach that walked, or we fired, whatever. I'm just the whole thing with the whole pitching coach was. I'm a huge believer in the players got to perform. The players are the one on the field. And if, look where we went with Eric Chavez last year. This year was just an opposite of last year. I think the morale, the vibe, and the people we had in the clubhouse, no matter what their average and stuff was this year, I think it made a huge of an impact than maybe what Eric Chavez didn't do this year or what the pitching coach didn't do this year. I'm a huge believer in that. But I love change. I'm happy. Don't know how I feel about the whole Snitker situation. I'm seeing a lot of Nepo baby type things like he shouldn't even be in the MLB. But let's just, you guys are more educated on that. But I like the change. I do. I am still a huge believer in the players need to be the ones to perform. Antron Richardson, I think he will be a huge loss. And for the people that are coming in, I think you can't really give him a report card until the end of the next season. So I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in regards with obviously Richardson leaving because of the Juan Soto stolen base thing. And all it comes down to, honestly, and not just Juan Soto, he helped the entire team with their run game at first base. And we talked about how it was great that he was going to stay. It sucks that they couldn't get a new contract. All I could say on that front is he better take a better job somewhere else or a promotion somewhere else, because if he's a base coach somewhere else, then we got some problems with Richardson, and we might have to. No, I'm not even gonna say. But either way, we're gonna have problems with Richardson, and
problems like what? Like he knows something.
I'm not gonna say it on here. What we got to do here, but with
you can't say that to someone like me, because now my mind's going crazy. Does he have nudes of players? Like, what does he have hot? What's going on here?
Off-air conversation, but with Skubal, I was also disappointed that he's departing as well. I feel like he's been a good part for the pitching staff, even though they needed to overhaul the pitching coaching staff either way. Just because when you have the walk issues that you do the past 2 years, maybe he was part of that. I don't know. But I did like him when they hired him, and I liked, some of the development of certain pitchers. it was disappointing. And then, with the Snicker hire, I'm glad that they hired someone that at least worked with Albert, because the thing we talked about when they hired him is we want someone that he's familiar with to collaborate with him. You can't do this whole Chavez Barnes thing where the two guys got opposite approaches and, it creates them butting heads or whatever because Chavez claims they made it work, which is complete and utter bullshit. Again, you could listen to Carson posted the 27-minute rant that him and I did about Chavez. You could go ahead and check that out if you want to hear us bash on Chavez for a half hour. But nonetheless, I'm intrigued by the hire because I also think Carson put out a tweet about him about where the Astros ranked.
I have it.
Yeah, so, I'll let you run through that in a second, but I get the argument that people are making about how, well, look at the talent he had, though, with that Astros team. The Mets don't have that talent. We're going to find out how much he played a role in the talent taking the next step in helping them, win the World Series in 2022. And, let's not forget that there were some young guys that came through and replaced some of the guys that left. Like you had Jeremy Pena come through. You had a couple other names that came up. And even with the Astros, how many times did I bring them up this year that's a team that had injuries? Jose Altuve was not performing well. You had Yordan Alvarez injured. Alex Bregman leaves. And that team still found a way to produce offensively while this Mets team couldn't hit all season. So I'm intrigued by the hire, at least.
Yeah, no, I'm 100%. I mean, I'll just quickly go through my thoughts on all these guys, either leaving or coming in. Obviously, listen, with Druskull, I liked when they first brought him in. Obviously, he was going to work under Jeremy Hefner when they brought him in the 2023 offseason. Had relatively good success in the first year with guys like Minaya, guys like Severino as well. This year, it just really didn't work out. And obviously, the Mets let go of Hefner. They let Druskull, interview with other jobs to see if he could possibly get a promotion. He probably wanted to be the Mets pitching coach, but probably Stern just felt that, okay, maybe, just coming off of last year, we kind of just need to change things up a little bit. So obviously, like I said, he leaves, he goes back to the Yankees where the Mets originally got him from. Listen, it sucks, but good luck to him, and, good luck to him in the Bronx. Obviously, look, and the big one is with Anton Richardson. Listen, am I disappointed that Anton Richardson is leaving? Yeah, 100%. Am I freaking out about it, though? Absolutely not. Listen, he's going to be a loss, but at the end of the day, when the Mets hired Anton Richardson 2 years ago, did any of us know who Anton Richardson was? Like, unless you're really like deep into baseball coaches, like nobody really knew who he was. So, and listen, I'm not just saying this to say that Anton Richardson is not important. He 100% he was important. He was very valuable in terms of, how he communicated with guys and how he coached certain guys in terms of, improving their base running abilities. Like I said, with Juan Soto, his previous high in but stealing bases was like 7-6 before this year.
Yeah, and the Mets and the Mets were one of the top slowest teams in baseball.
Yeah, they were. And, listen, Juan Soto had 38 stolen bases. He almost went 40-40. It's just, I think it's one of those things where, and like Carson from Mets Weekly, which if you guys watch that show, make sure you guys check them out. They do great streams covering the Mets. But it's like what Carson was saying yesterday in our group chat. Probably Anton Richardson wanted to get a job where he could be promoted and go to bench coach. And the Mets did have an opening at bench coach because John Gibbons ended up leaving by mutual consent. Stearns went in the opposite direction and hired a guy like Kai Correa from the Cleveland Guardians, who's more known for his defensive, his defensive deployment and how he teaches guys to defend and how he improves guys, with the glove and stuff. So I'm fine with that. And listen, like I said, with Richardson, I'm fine that, he wants to be ambitious and he wants to upgrade into a new higher role. I have no problem with that. Listen, like I said, it sucks that the Mets and him couldn't reach an agreement, but it is what it is. At the end of the day, it's sports. It's a business. Obviously, he has to do what's best for his career, and the Mets obviously are not going to stand in his way if he wanted to leave that bad. Because pretty much from everything what Andy Martino was saying, the Mets really tried to retain him. It's just couldn't get a contract done. And then obviously with Troy Snitker, the last one, he was obviously hired as the brand new Mets hitting coach. He's going to work under Jeff Albert because, like I said, and we talked about this in our previous podcast. If you guys didn't see that, make sure you guys check that out. We talked about that, the Kai Correa hiring, and we did our Mets player grades for this past season. But So and like what Evan brought up before, I like the fact that Jeff Albert and not Kai Correa, Jeff Albert and Troy Snicker, they worked together previously. It was for a short time in the Astros minor league system, but they worked together. There's a working relationship. There's a working experience there, and they have the same type of hitting philosophy and the same type of hitting tendencies, which was something that we did not like with the hitting coaches from the previous years, where it was Eric Chavez and Jeremy Barnes, because Barnes wanted to go with this new analytical, philosophical style. Meanwhile, Eric Chavez wanted to go with this old school 80s, 90s type of hitting philosophy where it was no data and it was all just putting the ball in play. And again, when you mix those two and there's two different voices, that's when players start to get confused and you start to see players not playing up to their regular standard. So I like the fact that the Mets hired Troy Snicker, and like I said, I like the fact that him and Jeff Albert worked together, and I'm sure Jeff Albert had plenty of say in this type of hire as well. Which
so you didn't see those arguments about Troy Snicker? Maybe it was like a funny thing though about him not being, but about like him only being in the league because of his father or something like that.
Yeah, I know, because he's Brian Snitker's son. I get that, but at the end of the day, and like I wrote down here, as his time of being the Astros co-hitting coach with Alex Cintron, I mean, again, we saw the Astros make deep runs. They made it to the World Series in 2019. They made it to the World Series in 2021. They made it to the World Series in 2022 where they beat the Phillies. So. And I get that they had great, talented players like Yordan Alvarez, like Alex Bregman, like Jose Altuve. But let's not forget, like I said, the Mets have good players too. They have Francisco Lindor. They have Juan Soto. They have Francisco Alvarez, who I'm kind of excited to see what he can do under under a totally whole new hitting philosophy and a whole new hitting coaches. And like what I also brought up with Carson, this was the Astros from 2019 to 2025, where Snitker was in place as a hitting coach. This was their stats with runners in scoring position. They were tied for 10th in terms of walks. They were first in lowest K rate, which is good. First in batting average, fifth in ISO, fifth in home runs, third in OPS, and second in WRC plus. So, like I said, in terms of a resume hire, it looks good on paper. But at the end of the day, and this is the same thing that I said with Jeff Albert and Kai Correa, we actually need to see the results with the Mets before we can make a full assumption of whether this was a good hire or not. Because like I said, on paper and based off resume, looks like a good hire. But at the end of the day, it's all about the results and what he's going to do with this Mets team and these type of players.
Yeah, time will tell. Time will tell with everything here.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, guys, I mean, that's...
Evan's gone.
I'm not sure what Evan's doing, but I mean, I'll just, quickly go through you guys' comments right here. Mendoza will be on a short leash next year, 100%, absolutely. We saw that that article from the New York Post where it said that if the Mets have a slow start this year, that Mendoza is going to be in the hot seat, and potentially you could see a guy like Kai Correa step into that role and become the new manager if Mendoza is fired early in the season. Mendoza is not on the hot seat with Correa as a bench coach. I mean, he could. I mean, maybe we will see what happens. And then Hornet again, disappointed Richardson is going 100%, but. Listen, I will say this. If I had to make a trade-off where Eric Chavez was going to go, but it meant Anton Richardson leaving as well, I'd make that trade all day. Just because I think Eric Chavez was that much of a cancer to this clubhouse and to this team. I'm 100% willing to make that trade. So like I said, it sucks to lose Richardson, but Eric Chavez is gone. I'm throwing a party. I'm happy. I'm excited. But Turbo, you have anything to add before we ultimately get out of here and finish up this live?
Honestly, about this topic, honestly, no. But
or just I mean anything in general with the Mets. What do you?
Anything in general? I really do think we are in a new chapter of the Mets. I do think it's not gonna take a year, 2 years to win the World Series. But I'm not going to lie to you. I'm also look at the Texas Rangers, look at the teams that you don't expect, Toronto Blue Jays, the teams that, obviously, yeah, they do perform and stuff like that. You don't expect to make the World Series. I do think the Mets are in positions to obviously go far and make the World Series and do compete for a championship. But I am also on a huge. I'm like a realist I too much of a realist as a Mets fan. Like I do think the Juan Soto is going to have a lot more better years going ahead. He had one of his best years this year. I just do think that we need to develop a core kind of like Philly. Instead of ripping up the core, that's why we need to do a great job of getting back Pete Alonso. We have Francisco Lindor. I would love to see Nimmo here for a while. The pitching, if Kodai Senga could have a good year, if Clay Holmes could really come back and just be reliable and consistent, and our young pitching could really show up for us, I do think we are a playoff team. We are a playoff team. I'm just always scared because once October hits and the playoff hits, every team starts back at 0. So I do think we are a playoff team. If we do not make the playoffs again this year, that is when, Matt, I go get rid of fucking. I don't care. I don't care if they were here for fucking 10 years and they were here for 18 years old. Get rid of everybody. So I do think this year here is a huge telling point for the future of the Mets. Huge telling point. It's not like last year where, let's get back. Like with Buck Showalter. Let's make a change. No, now it's we got to see it this year.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, guys, that's going to be pretty much everything for me and everything from us as well. I mean, it was a great podcast episode.
Thank you again.
Almost 2 hours.
Thank you.
An hour and 50 minutes. Turbo, thank you for coming on. And like I said, if you guys enjoy Turbo, which I'm sure you guys did, who doesn't enjoy a little Turbo comedy? One of the funniest guys on YouTube, like I said before. If you guys are interested in more of his content, his YouTube link is tagged in the title of this live stream. I also dropped his Twitter his Twitter handle and his YouTube handle again in the description of this live stream. So make sure you guys check him out. Again, go sub to his channel. I know Turbo's creating a new channel as well. So
no, not a new channel. I am working on just projects and content. I'm trying to really get back into stuff again. But I would appreciate subscribing just so when I do come back and stuff, I am you get to see what I'm working on. But hopefully, just to make people laugh. That's what I'm here to do. And I appreciate really having me on. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, and listen, like I said before, before we even started this before we started this podcast, whenever you want to jump on and talk Mets, let me know, because I'm all for getting on here. Because like I said, we're Mets fans. We enjoy talking about this team, even though sometimes they piss us off, even though sometimes they make us down in the press a little bit.
No, 100%.
We love this team.
Yeah, you got me in the off season right now. So again, I may have been a little some snow on the brain on some topics and some key facts here and there. But when you get me during the season, as the group chat, you could probably tell if you get me during the season and off a fresh loss, you may see the camera go out the window. So it may not be a great thing. But yeah, no, I'm very excited, and yeah, I'm ready for the future. I really am. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and we also got to hit up a couple games this year as well.
Yes. Oh my God, the nice little Met game vlogs going on. 100%. Yes.
100%. And like I said, guys, if you enjoy Turbo on this live stream, make sure you guys check out his content. One of the funniest guys getting on YouTube. Hasn't uploaded in a couple years, but his podcast, Professional Child, absolutely fucking hilarious. So some random complete topics he goes over, but it's hilarious, and I guarantee he'll make you laugh.
I'm trying to come back stronger than ever, you sexy bastard. So I'm working on it. Of
course, and you got to drop the final line of "sexy bastard," and that's your thing. That's your word. That's your go-to line. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for us. Like I said, make sure you guys, I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. Make sure you guys leave a like and subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell as well to let you guys know anytime we upload a video or go live here on the channel. That's going to be it from us. Peace, guys. Let's go Mets.